joined by my buddy Mike Hughes. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great.
Awesome. Good to see you, man. Always fun to nerd out on some stuff. And today we're doing a second episode in a row about all the crazy announcements Microsoft's had here in March of 2026 here, all around the favorite industry buzzword, of course, AI. So, man, let's jump in. So last week, Microsoft, or maybe it's a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, Microsoft announced E7, and also they announced their next phase of Agent 365 and then Copilot Co-work. So tell me your thoughts on E7. Let's jump in and get right to it. We did a deep dive on some of the high level of what it is. So let's get your feedback on it today.
So initial thoughts, it's not going to be for everybody, right? It's really going to be for those, and I think it's enterprises that are truly leaning in to building agents that are basically acting just like humans within your environment, right? Because that's really what Agent 365 is all about. It's about licensing agents to be just like people. And so I don't think small businesses are really going to be doing a lot of that. I think that's going to be more of consultants like managed service providers coming in and helping smaller businesses through that space. But if you're an enterprise and you're leaning into that and you're building a team internally and you're really leaning in the agents, I think this is going to be a great license.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're already in the E5 space and you're using Copilot, the pricing is basically, especially with the initial 15% off promo they're going to be running when it launches May 1st of 2026, that promo really makes it so that the cost difference between E5 plus Copilot and E7 is basically the same. And you get the Agent 365 license and the InterSuite licenses for free effectively. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be really aimed at those enterprises. We're hopeful they come out with a business version, a small business version, a sub 300. I think till Microsoft confirms that, it'll just be that, which is hope. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that. But those usually lag a little bit on that front. Yeah, obviously, we know what E5 has in it, and we've talked about that in the past. You kind of pulled together a really interesting document, though, that I think is worth pulling in because Microsoft is changing E5 on July 1st a bit as well. So why don't you jump into some of those features that are coming to E5 and also will be in E7 as of July 1st?
Is it possible for us to share that screen?
I can share that. Let me get it into a format that's a little easier to see. Hold on.
Yeah, I think that'd be good for everyone to just kind of see that. That way it's like, so I'm like, okay, because I'm on my iPad right now, so it's a little hard to pull things
No worries. Let me pull it up. And I also recognize as we were chatting here, I jumped in and didn't do an intro for you. And I was just excited to talk about this technology.
Well, everyone knows me, right?
So,
no.
A lot of people know you. We'll do, when we wrap up, we'll give you a chance to tell more about yourself.
Okay, yeah, no problem. No problem.
I want to make sure we do that. And I need to up my hosting game here. So, all right. Here's the document you pulled together, which is awesome.
Yeah,
really
there we go.
Great reference.
Yeah.
So,
thank you, AI.
Yeah, jump in here. Yes.
So let me tell you how this was built. Okay, let me start with that. Okay, this little screenshot. So I started this morning with Copilot, and I asked it, some basic questions about the licensing changes that are coming up. I asked it to provide some context, and then I asked Copilot to create a table, a virtual image. Had struggles doing that. So I went over to ChatGPT, plugged the same data in over there, was able to get an image created, but it added a fourth column and it did some other weird stuff. And so then I went over to Gemini, because Gemini has been doing really great at creating some stuff, and tried to do it there, and it screwed it all up, couldn't do it. And so then I went over to Perplexity and got this on the first shot.
Which tells you each model has its own strengths and weaknesses, which is the people who use it every day find.
Yeah,
and actually fits into where we'll land some of the conversation a little bit. So that's really interesting.
So I just want to share the context and some of the background, because I talk to people about AI all the time, and I tell them, I said, you're not going to use just one model. I personally pay for Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude Max 200, Perplexity Pro, and Gemini Pro. I pay for all of those because they're all have their own little way of doing things. So, and that's why, leaning into this conversation, that's why Microsoft is doing what they're doing. Microsoft realizes that one model will not rule them all, right? ChatGPT is not going to be the one that's going to be the solid engine that sits behind that. And that's why the Claude announcement, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But when it comes to the E5 licensing, this evolution as they're moving thing, that we had the Intune suite and the Entra suites announcements, a while back, where they're starting to pull some of those suite components because they really couldn't sell those suites independently. So it's just easier for them to take those product features and slide them into these existing licenses, and then raise the cost of those licenses. It's a much easier sell than trying to do it. And then the bundle piece comes into the play. So that's what you're seeing here with the E5. E5 pricing has been locked in for quite some time now. And now with all these other suites and pieces, E5 used to be the granddaddy of them all, as it were, of the licenses. You had everything. Well, that's no longer the case. So these bundles are really starting to come to shape with Microsoft from a sales perspective, and then we're getting advantage of these. So this transition that we're going from E5 on July 1st, or pre-July is what we have today, obviously, and then the July 1st change that is going to occur, where you see some of those suite components now starting to come into play with this licensing. So, and then I'll stop on the E7 one, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting stuff they're adding in on July 1st, right? The big one for a lot of companies is Microsoft Security Copilot. That was a expensive add-on. It was about $30K a year per technician at minimum previously, but I think it's a game-changing piece of technology. I think Microsoft's not getting the traction they want on it, so they're now including it in E5. I think that's a huge win. Most of the customers that we work with that have E5 are on E5 primarily for the security features, right? They're really wanting to lean into the full security stack. So that Security Copilot is the thing that really pops on this page for me. Obviously, you're adding enterprise app management and Intune, endpoint privilege management, which is Microsoft kind of stepping on some other vendors' toes in a great way, in a way that I welcome. Like, hey, can we do more PAM on the endpoint, which is something that a lot of IT departments are using a third-party tool for. The Intune advanced stuff is interesting. There's a lot of additional analytics and remote help where they're kind of even moving into some RMM space. So those are all pretty cool things. And then the cloud PKI for a lot of enterprises, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of legacy software and solutions that people are starting to evaluate. They're like, man, I got this whole PKI infrastructure that maybe is running on old Active Directory domain controllers, or I'm using a third party. I spent a lot of money for my PKI tool. And I think you're seeing the Oktas and the Microsofts of the world really start to compete over those edge cases that they don't have good answers for, because all the answers were old school on-prem products. And so that's really an interesting add as well.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of key things. So let me so the Security Copilot, read the fine print. Let me tell you that first, okay? Because it's still consumption based. What they're doing is they're giving you X number of credits, consumption units per user account that are licensed, okay? And it still works the same way, and you still have to turn on the consumption-based components to this. So be very, very, very careful with that. I'll start there. And Microsoft, they're not gonna like me hearing me say that, but that's still the case under the hood. It's still consumption-based. So I'm saying being cautious. It is a fantastic tool. Before, when you turned it on, it was a minimum like $108,000 a year for, it was like very, very expensive. Turned on. Again, adoption rate was low. Designed for the enterprise that really had their own in-house, SOC team that want to do analytics and all that stuff. But there's features of it, like in Intune and other areas, where it's fantastic. It's not necessarily security related per se, but it really helps you manage those tools better. So I don't know if in the future they'll break that out a little bit differently from a consumption-based unit just to a feature of the service, but that's the one thing I'll talk about there. The PKI, the thing I talked about people on this one is relate this to the old Windows Active Directory certificate authority days. Okay. This is your new certificate authority integrated into Intune. You can automatically push certificates out to your devices, control which devices have access to your environment, integrate it with your VPN access so you know which device is connecting. It's not, the kid's Steam computer that they moved the VPN client over to are now trying to connect, right? It's you've got some controls, and that's why the certificate stuff is there. And bringing that into the E5 license, I think, is a natural move to bring that in, because it's a needed tool, and it replaces those on-premise system, old school on-premise system components.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff. Microsoft's really building out a lot. And I think you're talking about the security Copilot consumption model. I think as IT professionals, we need to get used to the idea that companies like Microsoft are trying to bundle AI and want you to use it. But there is a very hard cost to high volume AI usage. It is a measurable, heavy duty cost on their infrastructure. And you're going to see more of this. This is just like Copilot Studio. Oh, we want to build an agent for our company. Great. You're going to get a certain amount of tokens to use on the tenant based on how many Microsoft 365 Copilot accounts you have. There's ways to kind of get people set up to use your Copilot agents without having Copilot Studio licensing. It's kind of a consumption-based model. But at some point, Microsoft's going to start billing you when you exceed a certain volume. And some of that's going to be number of employees based, right? As you said, you got a 3,000 user E5 tenant, you're probably going to get a lot of security Copilot tokens. If you got a 50 user tenant, you're going to get a lot less. And that's just something we have to learn, and something we have to keep track of, like how much consumption is being driven.
Yeah, and that's also, so tokens, consumption units, are based off token utilization. Token utilization is based on the questions that we ask, how we form them, and the responses that we get back. So the longer the question, the more words we type in, more tokens are consumed, and the larger the response is, the more tokens are consumed, which all equate to consumption units than what we pay for. So yeah, and then that's why you're seeing these efficiencies of over time, where the token utilizations are getting much more efficient. Prompting is getting a lot better, but if you want to keep down token usage, keep your words down and be a better prompter. Those understand how to learn how to prompt well, and you'll help keep some of those costs down.
And with Copilot Studio, Copilot agents, Security Copilot, the other thing to keep in mind is, make sure you're paying attention to what your team's writing. If somebody writes something that does a query every 10 seconds in an agent, you can need a lot of tokens. You write a very complex Security Copilot workflow that some guy's written to do his day job for him, and he runs it every day. That can cost you a lot of money, and you need to be paying attention. And I think that's always the place we're at with AI right now, is find where it adds value and focus on that. Don't just drive everything and anything I can think of into it. There's a cost to that for everybody involved, and it's worth being thoughtful about it. All right, so the E7 suite, now we add the Copilot for Microsoft 365 license. That's a $30 license. So we're now at $90, where a lot of customers are buying E5 and Copilot. E7 is $99. So we've already basically covered the cost of the upgrade if you're using Copilot broadly with E5, especially with the 15% launch discount, where that E7 is going to be right in the $85 range. It's actually cheaper than E5 and Copilot. So economically, it makes a lot of sense for some of these orgs. We've talked a lot about Copilot for Microsoft 365. I'm a little bit interested in that line right below that in your graph here. I think your AI suite may have Copilot Chat should be available on all of these. It's the analytics that I think is going to be mostly tied to E7. I think the analytics is going to be an E7 feature, but we can split hairs on that later. So let's talk real quick about the next two capabilities, which is the interest suite, the full interest suite, and the Agent 365. What do you see with those two tools?
Well, the interest suite, there's a number. It's not a huge lift, and it really depends on, again, how your organization is operating.
5 solutions in one.
I was just pulling some notes up on it before we jumped on the call. Basically, so if you're familiar with Global Secure Access, okay, you get those, right? So that's basically secured VPN via policies, so you can connect to your Microsoft 365 tenant securely. And the devices. So exactly. Exactly. And so that now adds private access and internet access through that same connection. So private access into your own
Yes.
infrastructure, and then internet access to public internet, Entra ID governance, and then some other verified components to it. So these are very higher end security pieces from an organization that your security team is going to look at, and you may or may not implement. But if you're using VPNs in your environment today, it's definitely going to have an advantage that you can switch to global secured access. You don't have to rely on physical hardware anymore to VPN into, simple agent Intune managed, and your users have that granular access that you want them to have, and you know which device is on the other end.
Absolutely. It adds a lot of data to the identity management when you're running global secure access. I do think it's a shot at the SASE providers. And I think from an IT perspective, there's a lot of companies running their Fortinets and their Sonic walls. And man, I'm telling you, having VPN capabilities enabled on your firewalls is asking for a 0-day to happen, because a lot of the
it's
0
really
days for
risky
the
today.
Fortinets and the Sonic walls, almost all their 0 days are on the VPN client solution, where they've got a SSL VPN. And so if you can turn that off and say, no, we don't VPN to my firewall. In fact, we're going with dumber firewalls or whatever, but we're extracting the VPN layer and using a SASE style solution like Global Secure Access, where you have one tunnel in, and then you can put MFA on those on-prem apps because they're going through that tunnel. It adds a lot of value, and I think that's a really great shot from Microsoft at those vendors. Hey, that spend, just fold it into E5 and E7. Like, just put the interest suite on, you're good to go.
Yeah. So I'll bolt onto that. So on the VPN stuff, what popped into my head was like, oh yeah, and these are probably a lot of the same people that are still running Exchange servers on-prem.
Yes. But they still exist.
Sorry,
man.
I just throw that out there. Because those still happen and they still got VPNs. But a lot of SMBs are going to be using VPNs to get access to file servers they still have on-prem. They have an ERP system or a file server or whatever. And then you move into the CMMC space, which is a whole nother thing, another conversation that we have about that, where essentially this is ZTNA. This is what it is. We're talking ZTNA here is what we're doing here. And a lot of vendors are moving off of a lot of companies are moving off those VPNs to their firewalls and moving to ZTNA solution. And this is Microsoft's version of ZTNA.
Yep. Awesome. And then the Intra ID, there's 3 features on the Intra ID side. There's a governance capability that does a lot of life cycles. So you can start doing access reviews, access packages, onboarding and offboarding in automated fashion. There's a really interesting project from Microsoft that if you're doing a lot of offboarding and onboarding and you have some security sensitivity around that, check out Project Opal, which is a Microsoft Frontier AI-based solution where you can drive people to do their onboarding in a locked down Windows 365 environment. It's really cool. But that's the kind of stuff for securing the onboarding and offboarding, least privilege access. Intra ID protection adds additional layers and data sources for just user risk detection, which is always a big deal these days. That's our number one attack vector. And then they add the verified ID, which allows you to really do some high-level employee verification capabilities, which can be really key in higher security environments. I see this whole second half of this Intra suite as a real shot at the Oktas of the world, saying, hey, you guys are doing some advanced identity stuff. We can do that too in the Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah. And Microsoft really needs to be doing this because obviously they work with a lot of regulated organizations, right? They've got the Department of Defense and they've got others in there. And a lot of these components that you just mentioned, if you're a regulated organization, let's say you have to follow NIST 800-171 or 53 or something like that, the things that we just talked about are all part of those regulations, right? You have to do identity governance. You have to do reviews. They have to do those components. So like when we move customers into the CMMC space, it's a G5 license. That's it, period, because you've got to have identity governance. You got to have all these things to meet these regulated requirements. So if you have to comply with the framework, that's why you need to be up in this particular licensing suites.
Yep. And you can bolt the Intra suite on a number of the other SKUs. So you don't have to go E7 to get Intra suite. They're just bundling it, right? So we talked about, hey, we're at a $90 value when we add Copilot. Then we throw Intra suite on. That's another $12, $15 on top. Now we're at $105. And then you throw Agent 365, which is another $15 license on top of it. Now that E7 license has a lot of value at the number. And I'm talking to executives who are like, man, it's a no-brainer for us. We need this. So Talk to me about what you're seeing with Agent 365. What are you excited about on that front?
Well, what I'm seeing and what I'm excited about are two different things. What I'm seeing is not a lot right now. What I'm
Correct.
excited about is what the potential is. Um, Basically, Agent 365 is a license for your agent. So you got to think about agents just like you would think about a person. A person needs identity security, the Defender security, the activity security, all that stuff that Microsoft does in the Defender suites from an activity perspective and a governance perspective of user accounts. The same thing's going to apply to an agent. So, and I'm not talking about the agent that you go into SharePoint, you click create an agent, you go to Copilot Studio, create a little agent, it's looking at data in your little chat bot and you're asking questions. Now, I'm talking about agents that are triggered to do specific activities autonomously. They see an action, they see an activity, and then they respond to that activity autonomously based on what you've trained it to do. So it's running like a person would be, just sitting there waiting for an activity to occur, and then they see it and then they go do what they've been trained to do. And so they have to be treated like a human, and therefore they have to be licensed like a human to have all the right security around that. So as an organization, as you move into creating these more autonomous agents, and they require all these additional functions or security services like a human would, they've got to be licensed. And that's what this Agent 365 license is all about.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of value there. I also think it's the governance and visibility side, right? We've launched into this world of agents. Hey, you got a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. Guess what? You get Copilot Studio. Go build something. Oh, cool. I can low code, no code, my own agent that sends an email to HR every time we hire somebody to remind them to send them a T-shirt, right? They build some agent and they're off to the races. And we build another agent that takes our HR documentation and policies and procedures and answers questions off of it. Well, who's built what across your enterprise? How many agents are there? What are they accessing? What are they doing? Oh, somebody plugged in the Monday.com agent. Somebody put it on the SAP agent. Somebody pulled in a agent that's connecting to this and it's pulling over an API here. It's sprawling and hard to get ahead of. And from a governance perspective, that's a real concern. Like, what are these agents doing? What access do they have? What data are they looking at? So Microsoft's really working hard to get ahead of that, because the enterprises that are embracing agents are terrified of this piece, because it's a lot to get your fingers wrapped around. And maybe you got your cloud app security deployed to the point where you're really seeing that CASB level of who's using what AI agents, and you have some reporting. This is going to give you really granular reporting across your entity, across your enterprise, of who's using what agent and what's it doing and what's it accessing and how is it deployed and is it secure and does it need to be patched? I mean, there's a whole slew of new skills and probably verbiage we're going to learn over the next few years about, herding the agent cats, as it were.
Yeah. And so the Frontier program right now is in preview, and a lot of these features that you just mentioned are, if you log into the admin consoles, you're going to see the preview versions of these right now. If you go to Entra, you're going to see this in Entra. You're going to see this in the admin console. You're seeing various different places, and it's treating agents just like it would treat people. Everyone has an identity. They all have a GUID. They all have their own identity. They all can be managed like people. They can be given access to data. You can see the permissions that they have. You can see how they're interconnected with each other, which agents can talk to with other agents. There's visual maps that Microsoft provides now. So there's a whole bunch of administrative stuff. So as an administrator, as an IT admin of an environment, you're going to need to learn this. You're going to need to know these consoles, because these agents are going to be treated like humans, and they're going to need governance just like a human would need governance.
Yes.
And you don't want things to go rogue. It's very similar to Microsoft Teams, right? When by default anyone can go create a team, and then all of a sudden a 15 employee company has 250 teams, and it's like, what the heck's going on here? Well, the same thing can happen with agents. All of a sudden people start experimenting and playing and start creating all these agents. You can have this sprawl, and you can have this risk that you're introducing that you're not aware of. So you've got to be really cautious with it. So get ahead of it now, because it is coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Frontier is great to call out, though, because Frontier is Microsoft's early access program for their latest AI innovations. across the Microsoft 365 stack. And so if you want to play with those features, you want to get ahead of them. And as IT people, we need to do that. Like, you can't wait for it. You need to understand it, because if somebody gets into something or Microsoft GA is a feature and all of a sudden your users are using it, it's really helpful to have, maybe a sandbox of frontier features. And most of the frontier access can be scoped to a group of users. And so I'm with you, Mike. I think admins really need to put some effort into saying, I'm going to go figure out all these frontier capabilities and get them enabled for at least some of the IT departments. We're learning it. We're seeing it. There's three main areas that frontier is kind of enabled. One is just agents. Microsoft's built a number of agents in the Copilot agent store that are frontier agents. Anybody can access that who has a Copilot license. So if you license one user for Copilot for 365 on a tenant, you can start enabling frontier features. Those frontier agents are worth looking at. There's some interesting stuff. There's one for Planner. There's one for Workforce Insights. There's a number of different frontier agents. And actually using one of those agents is part of getting you into the frontier program, which we're going to talk about here in a second as something that many people are going to want to get access to. You're going to want your tenant in the frontier program to get early access to some of the other stuff that's coming. There's also core app features that are frontier. So features across the Microsoft 365 apps like Word and Excel, those can also be enabled. Those can also be scoped. And then there's other features beyond agents, like you talked about the Agent 365 store. And each one of those require a little bit of admin work to enable. You're getting access to the agents. You need to go in as an admin center, and you got to choose who can access those frontier agents. And then it's worth getting a few people playing with them. The core apps, you actually have to enable those capabilities. And then sometimes you actually have to deploy the beta mode in the Office apps. So some of the features won't show up unless you're pushing maybe through Intune the insider programs of those apps for Windows and for Microsoft apps. So there's a little bit more work on some of those capabilities. And then, like I said, there's some interesting things. You want to look at the Microsoft 365 Agent 365 portal. There's some instructions on enabling that, starting to play with that. I mentioned Project Opal. That's a tool for onboarding employees in a secure manner. Worth looking at that. There's kind of a cool wizard to deploy that. And then there's also some AI-enabled cloud PCs that have the TPUs on them and can run some of your models. So if you want to test some of the local stuff, you can do it there. So a lot of stuff to do on the frontier side beyond just playing with it, because we're nerds and we like the new technologies and we want to play with the new hotness.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that are coming for people who are using the frontier mode, Mike?
Well, one thing to remember too is the Frontier program is going to essentially end on May 1st when Microsoft releases E7, because that's where in the sense that the Agent 365 kicks in, right? So all that agent management control piece is in that plane, and that's part of the Frontier program today, but it won't be. So you got to go look at that stuff today and see what's there. And people that need to be licensed for Agent 365 are the ones that benefit from one of those agents functioning. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, it's kind of like Entra ID. If I can't just add one Entra ID license to my 4,000 employee company, everyone has to be licensed, because once I got one conditional access policy that affects everyone, everyone's benefiting from that. So, that's the way. So understand that backplane. Yes, it does take a few steps to get through the frontier and get it turned on. The features are pretty cool. It's like we're seeing in other places where Microsoft is integrating the ability to edit documents in real time versus just having the side chat and say, would you like me to create a new document? Or you have to copy and paste it in. Yep. That kind of stuff is going to go away. It's going to be in the editors, in the Word, Excel, to-do planner, all that stuff is going to have these components to it now that are going to be able to edit in real time. I think that's what everyone's really looking forward to in there. Do you want me to talk about the Claude Anthropic and the Grok add-ons yet, or you want to wait on that?
Before we go to Cowork, let's talk about Claude, but let's not hit Cowork. So
okay,
that is a frontier feature that I think is also worth playing with. Is right now most of the Copilot AI is ChatGPT based, and you can choose which version of ChatGPT you're using, you got to drop down. You can choose, how creative it is and which model it's running. But in Frontier, you can actually enable some Anthropic models. Right now, it's mainly limited to Sonnet in the Copilot app. Copilot Studio has access to Grok, and so that's an interesting thing. And so you're going to see that there's some of these newer features that you can give some of your users access to. And back to your original point of, hey, I find I get different results when I use Copilot versus ChatGPT versus Anthropic versus Perplexity. Microsoft, I think, is trying not to get they're not trying not to hitch their wagon to one horse. I think they're trying to pull in the best models and give people different options. And I think you're going to see that grow over the next year. But their original big deal was with OpenAI and ChatGPT. They announced a big deal with Claude about 6 months ago. And so now you can use Sonnet and Copilot. But one of the other Frontier features that's going to be enabled that you'll only be able to access in the earlier previews through Frontier is Copilot Co-work. And I'm really excited to hear you talk more about this, because that's Microsoft's implementation of Claude's Co-work product. So tell us what Co-work is and some of the things you're doing with it, and give us a deep dive on that.
Yeah. Before I go there, I want to build on something you said earlier about how Microsoft is adding other models, right? So if you look at the Microsoft AI stack, right, it goes from the Copilot license, which then gives you access to Studio to build, because you can build licenses, you can build agents with Copilot, a couple clicks on SharePoint, and you got an agent in every repository, and they're putting them in the default.
Yep.
Next level up is you go to Studio and say, okay, I want an agent built that talks to these specific websites and data sources internally, and so on and forth. You can build agents there. And the next level up is Microsoft Foundry. Well, if you go look at Microsoft Foundry and you look at their LLM, their language model catalog that's there, there's a whole bunch of companies there, right? So Microsoft's already reached out and worked with all these different companies to bring their models into Microsoft Foundry so you can use them at that upper level. And it's not too much more difficult from going from Studio to that, but it gives you more flexibility up at that level. And it's consumption based. We're back to that consumption model again, right? So that's the piece. And so Microsoft, like you said, started with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and they've gotten really good now that when ChatGPT models are released, Microsoft's releasing them within Copilot fairly quickly. I think 5.4 came in like within a week. I mean, it was like really fast. It came in. So they're staying on top of the game. But, last September, Microsoft announced a strategic relationship with Anthropic for ChatGPT because, you can't live with one model. Like I explained earlier, you're just not going to be in a model, right? You're going to be using multiple models because they have different features. And Anthropic is more of that engineering mindset model. They've made a strategic shift to move in that direction. So then we had this announcement around the Ignite time period where all of a sudden now the Anthropic model Claude was available. You can go to the admin console, check one box, and it's turned on in Copilot and in Studio, and you can select it as a different model now as a drop down and as a choice. And then in February they announced Grok, so XAI is now for Grok 4.1 in there, which is a different model. And if you play with the different models, they all have different personalities and they all have virality levels. They all talk to you a little bit differently, and it's fun to talk to Grok because it can get really creative in its language versus some of the other models. So it's just interesting to see all the different personalities that you have with these models.
Cool.
But Copilot Co-work, I think, is going to be fantastic because I've been living and breathing in Claude Co-work for 6 months now. And it is just absolutely an amazing way to work. I can't begin to explain it. Go watch the YouTube videos is what I'm going to say, right? But it really has changed the way I work. I still use Copilot and ChatGPT all the time because that's where my business data is sitting inside of there, right? But with Cowork, what I do is I'll sync my OneDrive down, and then I'll create a little folder called Claude, and I create these little sub projects in there, and I'll attach my little Cowork projects to those particular folders, and then I start working with that data. So I can pull data from multiple sources, drop it into a folder, and start doing whatever I need to do with that particular data. And it's a fantastic way to work. And then you've got you've got the chat, you've got Cowork, and then you've got Claude Code. And Claude Code is, you think it's just for programmers, but it's not. It's really for anybody, because you can do much more creative things in code than you can do in chat. But Cowork is the derivative of code. People were doing things with code, and Anthropic thought, well, holy smokes, we can build a little interface for this. And they did it literally in a couple of weeks. They just built this Cowork interface, which is essentially running on code. So it's a fantastic thing. And to have Microsoft now bring that in, because they've already got, you can see the history, right? You can see the track of where they've come from September to now. Bringing in Cowork into the web interface, not the desktop experience that I just mentioned, right? I think it will come, but just that first step of being able to have Cowork and have it say, monitor my schedule. Oh, anytime I receive an email from Nathan, right, that's asking for a meeting invite in a particular time period, if I'm available, automatically book a Teams meeting. That kind of autonomy that we're going to see in Cowork, I think it will really be I won't say the first, but I'd say it'll be a significant impact once you learn how to use it.
Yeah, I think so. I've talked to a couple people with inside access to Copilot Co-work. It's very limited to internal teams, but just asking them to share what they can. I'm hearing things like, man, it has transformed how I work with email on my calendar. Things like that. And you might go, well, is that a big deal? Well, for me, that's huge. Email, Teams messages, calendaring, that dominates my life right now as an executive in a business. It's just keeping up with those things is daunting. It can be a lot of work, and having an assistant, there's always the thing, well, do I go get an EA and have them help me with all this? Man, AI is purpose built for some of this, and I've heard some really exciting things about this. I think the other thing I'm excited about is, as we're watching some of these things like Claude Co-work and OpenClaw, which is like an open source similar product that has some real amazing benefits and also some major concerns. There's some people who have really gotten themselves in a pickle by giving OpenClaw too much access. My concern is always with these bleeding edge technologies, like, can we deploy this safely in enterprise environments? Can you deploy it safely in your dev environment? Yeah, those guys know what they're doing. They're smart. They're paying attention. They're going to be using this stuff, and you don't want to get in their way. But from a corporate perspective, do I trust Claude and their Cowork product across my enterprise? And what are the management layers, and what are the governance layers, and how do I kind of control it? I'm really excited about Microsoft saying, hey, we're not going to let you get left in the dust. But we're going to build that functionality, but build it into the construct we have in the Microsoft world, where Agent 365 and Copilot, security controls across your tenant apply to Cowork. It's going to honor your boundaries. It's going to be careful about what it stores. It's going to be careful where that data goes. And so I'm really excited to be able to get our customers and internally be able to use these products. Like, I knew our internal IT department was going to be like, no, we're not touching Claude Cowork. No way. That's not going to fit in the equation.
Sorry, it's coming, baby.
It's coming. But Copilot Cowork really simplifies that conversation with IT to say, this is already in the infrastructure you already know and trust.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about that angle where Microsoft, I was literally sitting there a week before they announced it going, man, Microsoft, you're in trouble if you cannot catch up to this Cowork thing. And a week later, they're like, we're coming.
Yeah.
So it was great.
I know. We were on a call together, and I kind of got on them a little bit. It's like, hey, guys, we're not seeing you out there. You got to be doing something. Then all of a sudden they do this. They're like, okay, good. Smart move, Yeah, it's really good. And like you said, it is within Microsoft boundaries. Microsoft's vetting them out. They have to follow by Microsoft rules. Yes, it's the models, but it's like I said earlier, it's a little bit more restrained when it's coming out first. And so they're being cautious, and safety is always a first. Safety and security is a first component. OpenClaw, yes, you can let anything go wild. I got OpenClaw running on a dedicated Mac Mini, and it's got its own identities and logins. It's just like a real person, but I've got it in a controlled state. I give it read access to a couple of my accounts, read only, because I don't quite trust it yet, to be honest. It's a little scary, and it's a little slow with the way it thinks. But I think the fact that Anthropic went out and hired the guy that built it says something. um,
Yes, I
and
agree.
we're going to see more. And if you follow Anthropic at all, the pace that they're releasing new features at, I mean, just even the last week is amazing. Microsoft doesn't move that fast. Microsoft moves at a slower pace than everyone else. So I think you're going to be you're going to be playing with different models. But the fact that we can have this functionality, this engineering mindset of Claude within the Microsoft space, within Copilot, is going to be huge to be able to have this co-work capability there. Because if you look at ChatGPT right now, it can't do this. Very few,
Yep.
there really, I mean, there's a few out there that can, but not like Claude is
Yep.
doing it. But right, and so Microsoft had to really bring this in because that's what their customers are chiming for. And if you don't provide it to them, they're going to go to somebody else. And the fact that you don't have to go off and pay for a $20 or an enterprise license to have Claude in your environment or Grok 4.1, you just added $40 a month of value per Copilot user per month to every Copilot licensed employee.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a great value. And I'm so excited to get to play with it. So we're pining for that early access program to open up. I don't think it's hit yet. I think it's a couple weeks out, maybe further. But you got to be in the Frontier program to have access to the early access program. As you said, a lot of this seems to be tied to that May 1st date of E7.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I think early access for Cowork is going to happen a little bit before that, is my impression. But regardless, it's an exciting time to be a nerd in the Microsoft space. It's going to be a topic we're going to be discussing on the podcast here regularly because there's so much movement here and it's so interesting, and it's going to be a learning curve for all of us. And I think maybe that's where we wrap it up is, if you're in the IT space, you got to be learning. It's a transformational moment and you have to be playing with it because you will get left behind and your users will not be left behind. They're ahead of you if you're not playing with this.
Yeah.
You need to know it and understand it so that you can manage it and use it responsibly. Responsible AI use in the corporate culture is a thing that we are responsible for. As IT providers, IT professionals, we've got to be ahead of this.
Yeah, employees will do what they do, right? And don't forget, I get to talk about me before we leave.
Oh, I'm not forgetting, my friend.
Don't forget.
I appreciate it.
So,
well, let's segue to that. Let's segue to that. Well, first of all, I apologize for just jumping in. I was so excited. I missed giving you a chance to do your intro. Hopefully people have hung around until here, and we'll have you on again and make sure we do it in the right order next time. So, Mike, tell us more about you, some of the things you're doing, and ways people can connect with you.
Yeah, so most of my career, I was the customer. I was that enterprise customer. I was that CTO managing 6 companies and 8,000 employees of technology, which was, it had its challenging days. But for the last few years, I've been out consulting. Obviously, I know Microsoft fairly well, and so I live and breathe in the Microsoft ecosystem. I help companies and other MSPs, for that matter, with their Microsoft practices. And we build tools. We've got a whole Fortify program we call Fortify on how to secure Microsoft 365 on that journey from just basic security all the way to agentic. We've got a whole 6-ring journey of what that looks like. So if you're ever, how do I get to AI? How do I secure myself? We've got that journey. And then we've got other tools like Frontier 365 about license management and visibility into your licensing that Microsoft does not provide you. So really leaned in heavily to the Microsoft ecosystem. And love just sitting on calls like this and talking about it,
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. You are one of the people I go to when I have questions because I know you're always a step ahead on these things. Always on the bleeding edge. You've got the paper cuts to show for it. So, thank you for joining us today. Real fun conversation, and I'm sure we'll be having many of these in the next few months. And thanks everybody for joining us on the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks.